I lay in a vegetative state in a hospital room in another world, my body tied to life support while my consciousness transmigrated into a novel. Through an unexpected turn of events, I ended up married to Chloe Lewis, the proud heiress of the powerful Lewis family. All because of an accidental pregnancy one drunken night. For years, everyone assumed I was just a freeloading live-in son-in-law, desperately clinging to my wealthy wife's status and money. They thought I would endure any humiliation just to stay in the Lewis household. But on our daughter's 5th birthday, after hearing a heart-wrenching wish she made over her birthday candles, I decided I had enough. I walked away without looking back. I handed the signed divorce agreement to Chloe. She merely glanced at me with an indifferent, icy look, as if staring at a total stranger. In our 5 years of marriage, we had never once shared a bed since the wedding night. We slept in separate rooms and rarely even ate dinner at the same table. Yet whenever we were out in public, she put on a flawless performance of a loving, devoted wife, showing off our fake affection to the high society crowds. I worked as a legal advisor for the Lewis Group, while she was the reigning heiress. In any typical romance novel, I would be the classic live-in son-in-law of a wealthy dynasty. But our marriage wasn't born out of a family debt, deep romance, or an arranged agreement between parents. It was purely an accident. Because of that single mistake, I endured years of cold stares from my father-in-law and brother-in-law. They treated me with sheer disdain both at home and at the corporate office, acting as though I were a stray dog they didn't even care to feed. But I tolerated all of it, until today. Chloe's eyes remained distant and unfeeling. She said in a flat tone, "George, do you really think I wouldn't dare divorce you? Talking about personal matters during work hours. That's an $1,800 fine deducted from your salary." She was completely convinced I wasn't genuinely seeking a divorce, assuming I was just using it as a pathetic ploy to pressure her. Her distant gaze took me back to an afternoon years ago. 3 months into my job at the firm, my supervisor targeted me repeatedly because I had unknowingly taken a position he wanted for his own protege. Frustrated after being berated for minor formatting differences, I went to a quiet corner of the company courtyard to smoke a cigarette. That was where I first saw Chloe. She was stunning, wearing a fitted black dress. Her long hair swayed gently in the breeze, her features sharp and elegant. But despite her striking beauty, she was leaning against the wall, quietly crying. I exhaled a cloud of smoke and impulsively patted her shoulder. She looked up at me, startled, her teary eyes shining in the sunlight. Synthesizing with her bad day, I said, "Did you get scolded by management too?" "Let me tell you, the higher-ups here are all brainless. Why waste your energy getting mad at idiots?" She frowned slightly and asked, "Are they all like this?" "Of course," I replied. I stood there smoking while naming and cursing every manager I knew for 10 straight minutes, venting my frustration. Then I added, "If this company keeps running like this, it's doomed. Don't be sad. Every employee curses their boss. You'll feel much better once you let it out. If you need to, you can lean on my shoulder." To my surprise, she actually rested her head on my shoulder, seeking comfort. Her fragrant hair brushed against my cheek. I felt her rapid breathing gradually slow down and steady. My heart pounded like I'd been hit by electricity. I thought it was the beginning of a beautiful connection. But a few minutes later, she stood up, wiped her tears, smiled thinly, and pointed at my employee badge. "George, right? Slacking off and smoking on company premises during work hours. That's an $1,800 fine." Later, I found out she had been crying that day because of Mark, her childhood crush who had moved abroad. But by the time I realized it, I had already fallen deeply in love with her. Chloe never cared for me from the start. Her heart had always belonged to Mark. So I didn't bother arguing with her now. "Fine me then," I said calmly. Chloe, I want a divorce as soon as possible. Chloe finally looked down at the document in her hands and scoffed. George, if you want to trick me into a reaction, at least draft a realistic agreement. $50 million in compensation? She didn't know that the $50 million figure matched the exact amount her father had once offered me to leave her. Back then, I turned it down because I was a transmigrator completing system missions to awaken from my real-world coma. The system had told me my ultimate mission was to marry Chloe and raise a child with her. I had tried with all my heart for years, but I could never warm her cold heart. We had no future together. This money was merely belated compensation, and I didn't want to have to waste another second arguing over it. Chloe stood up, looking down at me disdainfully in her designer dress. You didn't even write anything about our daughter's custody, she sneered. What, you don't even want your precious daughter anymore? I smiled faintly. No. I used to love my daughter, Hannah, with every fiber of my being. Having grown up as an orphan with no parents or siblings, I never understood what family felt like until I held baby Hannah in my arms for the first time. Seeing her tiny face and feeling her warmth melted my heart. She filled a void inside me that had existed my entire life. She was my only blood relative, and I vowed to protect her with my life. Chloe, however, felt no attachment to Hannah. Because Hannah was the result of an unplanned pregnancy, Chloe's contempt for me naturally transferred to the child. When the doctor placed newborn Hannah beside her in the hospital bed, Chloe took one brief glance and turned her head away, saying coldly, "She looks too much like George." From that day on, she dumped Hannah entirely on me. Her mother didn't love her, so I played the role of both father and mother. For 5 years, I poured endless love, patience, and care into every moment of Hannah's growth. Yet strangely, Hannah adored Chloe and resented me. Hannah was unusually articulate for her age. At just 3 years old, she looked at me coldly and said, "Mom doesn't spend time with me because of you, Dad. It's all your fault." I brushed it off as childish nonsensical talk. At age 4, she met Mark, who had returned from abroad after his own divorce. Hannah told the housekeeper, "No wonder Mom likes Uncle Mark. I like him too. Uncle Mark is so much better than Dad. He's handsome, rich, and buys me fancy imported candy, unlike Dad who never lets me eat anything fun. All because I restricted her sugar intake to protect her teeth." I overheard her complaints from the kitchen that day. Suppressing the sting in my chest, I gently made her homemade pear and hawthorn lollipops. Healthy and sweet. But Hannah snatched the lollipops from my hand and threw them straight into the trash can, yelling, "I don't want your cheap garbage. I want the luxury candy Uncle Mark brought from Italy. I don't care about cavities." I stood there, stunned. In that moment, I realized how much Hannah resembled her mother, both of them completely immune and indifferent to my warmth. The breaking point arrived on Hannah's 5th birthday. Both mother and daughter insisted on inviting Mark to our house. As I was lighting the birthday candles, a long-absent mechanical voice chimed in my head. "Host, long time no see." "I am back. Host, your mission is complete. You have accumulated enough points to return to your original world and wake up from your coma. Alternatively, you may choose to remain here. After all, you have a family in this world now." As I hesitated, torn by the system's offer, Hannah made the decision for me. Standing over her glowing cake, surrounded by guests, she closed her eyes and announced her wish in a clear, loud voice. "I wish Mom and Dad would get a divorce, and I wish Uncle Mark could be my new dad." Silence fell over the room. Chloe merely frowned slightly and whispered, "Hannah, make another wish." Mark teased her playfully. "You can't say that out loud. Did you get your dad's permission to replace him?" "You're gonna get in trouble!" But his eyes were brimmed with smug pride. I smiled quietly. In my mind, I spoke to the system. "Take me home. I don't want to stay here for another second." However, the system delivered unexpected news. Since the central system has recently processed a high volume of transmigrators requesting return, there is now a mandatory cooling-off period for departure. I was dumbfounded. A cooling-off period? Are you kidding me? How long? 3 years. Host, I cursed internally. 3 years? Will all the vegetables in my garden wither before I can finally leave? The system paused, then replied smoothly. Host, your insults are surprisingly poetic. As compensation for my absence, I will boost your total points by 33%. When you wake up from your vegetative state in the real world, your physical health will be fully restored. Fine, I replied. Then, I'll settle the divorce first, which brought me back to Chloe's office. Chloe sat behind her grand desk, staring at me with a mocking smirk. George, have you forgotten who begged me 5 years ago to keep the baby? You said if I aborted Hannah, you couldn't go on. Those were indeed my words. 5 years ago, when Chloe heard news of Mark's marriage overseas, she drank heavily at a bar and came to me in heartbreak. She held my collar and cried, George, why wasn't I good enough for Mark? If he can marry someone else, why can't I find another man? You like me, don't you? You've been waiting for me. I had nodded, and we spent the night together. Despite taking precautions, she became pregnant. Her immediate reaction was to schedule an abortion, fearing a child would prevent Mark from coming back to her. At that exact moment, the system warned me. If the child is aborted, the mission fails immediately, and your real-world body will suffer brain death. Driven by both the system's warning and my own deep desire for a family, I begged her desperately. If this baby dies, I won't survive either. Keep the baby, Chloe. I promise I'll take care of both of you for the rest of my life. Without my desperate pleas, Hannah would never have been born. Yet Chloe never cared for either of us. Her heart belonged solely to Mark, the boy who had grown up alongside her in the orphanage before her biological father reclaimed her. Now, sitting across from me, Chloe sneered. Since you and your daughter both prefer Mark so much, you can form a happy little family together after the divorce. Everyone wins. Her eyes flashed with condescension. George, aren't you hypocritical? Trying to use divorce to make me beg you to stay? You disgust me. And Hannah is my daughter. By threatening me with divorce, you forfeit all rights as a father. If you want me to sign these papers, promise me you will never see Hannah again. In the past, such a demand would have crushed me, because love makes a person weak and vulnerable. But now, I felt nothing. Fine, I said smoothly. Chloe froze, her smug expression faltering for a split second. Darkening, she snatched a pen, signed the document, and threw a copy at my chest. As I picked up the paper and turned to leave, she bit her lip and snapped, Take your dramatic lies and get far away. Don't ever come back. I stopped at the doorway, turned back, and offered a polite, businesslike smile. We haven't officially registered the divorce certificate yet, and you haven't transferred the $50 million compensation. Please write the check now so I can leave immediately. Thank you. Chloe's face flushed bright red with embarrassment and fury. Reluctantly, she opened her drawer and signed a cashier's check. Watching George walk out of the office without a single backward glance, Chloe felt an inexplicable sense of panic tightening in her chest. Just then, Secretary Davis walked in holding a stack of files. Having worked as Chloe's assistant and confidant for years, she looked at Chloe's pale face and asked gently, Chloe, is George really demanding a divorce? Chloe took the files despondently and nodded without speaking. Secretary Davis smiled reassuringly. It's just a temporary marital spat. George would never actually divorce you. He loves you and Hannah way too much. How could he bear to leave? Chloe frowned, attempting to regain her composure. Whether he leaves or not, he has no right to put on an attitude with me. Everything he has is thanks to the Lewis family. If he really insists on a divorce, I'll change Hannah's last name to Lewis immediately. Secretary Davis smiled, placed the papers down, and quietly left the room. The large office suddenly fell deathly quiet. For some reason, Chloe kept visualizing George's departing figure, calm, detached, and utterly unfamiliar. It wasn't the submissive George she knew. Her mind unexpectedly flashed back to their wedding night 5 years ago. George had been so gentle, holding her trembling hands and whispering softly, "Chloe, I'm not doing this just to take advantage of you. I genuinely care about you. Please, let's treat each other well from now on." Though she hadn't understood his intensity at the time, his warmth had comforted her. Yet over the years, her resentment toward him for trapping her with a pregnancy overwhelmed everything else. She had punished him with 5 years of cold indifference, assuming he was homeless, hopeless, and bound to stay by her side forever, regardless of how she treated him. Now, his soft promises felt like distant echoes from another lifetime. Unable to focus on work, Chloe left the office early and drove home. Entering the villa, she asked the housekeeper, "Where is George?" The housekeeper whispered nervously, "Sir packed his bags and moved out this afternoon, ma'am." Chloe's heart plummeted, though she forced a cold scoff. He sure knows how to commit to an act. She walked upstairs into her bedroom, trying hard to ignore the unsettling void lingering in the house. After securing the divorce papers and the check, I returned to the villa one last to pack my few more personal belongings. When I walked down to the living room, 5-year-old Hannah was lounging on the sofa, playing video games on her tablet, candy wrappers strewn across the floor. She glanced up at my suitcase and said nonchalantly, "Mom said I can eat as much candy as I want now. Uncle Mark gave them to me, so mind your own business." I offered her a peaceful smile. "I won't mind at all. You can eat 100 candies if you like. If you get cavities, that's your problem, not mine." I knelt down and pinched her cheek gently. "Hannah, I'm leaving." "Where to?" she asked without looking up from her screen. "To make room for your new dad," I said. "I won't be coming back." Hannah frowned, mimicking her mother's haughty tone. "You're talking nonsense. Mom says you're an orphan with nowhere else to go. You're completely useless, Dad. No one in this family likes you or needs you. Uncle Mark is way better than you. You should just leave. I won't miss you anyway." She turned her head back to her tablet. In the past, hearing those words from my own child would have broken my heart. I used to spend hours playing silly, childish games with her, drawing cartoons for her, only to be met with her tantrums and disdain. Now, I felt entirely detached. "All right, Hannah, I hope you keep that tough attitude of yours." Dragging my single suitcase out the front door, the afternoon sunlight hit my face. A simple phrase echoed in my mind, "Live towards the sun." Since I had 3 years to wait before the system could pull me out of this world, I deposited the check, resigned from my law firm position, and rented a high-end beachside apartment. The apartment complex was beautiful, overlooking the vast ocean. One morning while standing by my window sipping coffee, I noticed a tiny figure on the beach below. A 3-year-old boy walking aimlessly into the ocean waves alone. Instinctively, I ran downstairs in my slippers, crossed the coastal road, and rushed onto the sand. I scooped the little boy out of the shallow water just as a wave crashed near him. "Where are your parents, little guy?" I asked, setting him down. The boy was about 3 years old with big, round eyes like dark grapes. His lashes were wet with tears, but he didn't cry aloud. He just gripped his shirt tightly. "Daniel!" a woman's voice called out. A striking woman rushed over, her long dark hair flowing in the sea breeze. She wore an elegant beige trench coat over a casual outfit, her expression filled with gentle warmth. "Thank you so much," she said breathless, pulling the boy close. I was watching him from the hammock under those trees, but I didn't realize he'd wander so close to the water. She looked down at the boy. "Daniel, say thank you to the gentleman. Instead of turning to her, the little boy buried his face against my pant leg, grabbing my trousers. "Hug," he mumbled softly. The woman blinked in surprise. "That's strange. Daniel never asks strangers to hold him." I smiled, picked up the toddler, and walked back toward the apartment building alongside her. To my surprise, we ended up on the exact same floor. She lived right next door. The woman paused at her door, evaluating me thoughtfully. "Mr. Miller, Daniel seems to really like you. I noticed from the property records that you recently moved in and aren't working at the moment. I'm a surgeon at the regional hospital, and I work long shifts. I just had to fire my previous nanny for neglect. Would you be interested in looking after Daniel during the daytime? Name your price." I looked at her, amused. "Miss, are you sure you're not trying a pickup line? You look like a runway model, and you're asking a total stranger to babysit your kid?" She laughed, pulling out her keys. "I'm serious. And I'm your landlord. I own the penthouse floor you're renting from." Embarrassed by my assumption, I cleared my throat. "My apologies, Miss Landlord. Regarding your offer, taking care of kids is a lot of work. I used to raise my daughter, but I'll double your monthly rental discount, plus a generous daily rate," she offered with a warm smile. Looking at little Daniel's pleading eyes, I couldn't resist. "Sure. When do I start?" Her name was Sarah Vance. Unlike my spoiled daughter Hannah, 3-year-old Daniel was quiet, polite, and remarkably easy to care for. I looked after him with the same dedication I had given Hannah, cooking healthy meals and playing games with him. Whenever I won a video game match, Daniel would sit on his tiny stool, clapping his hands enthusiastically. "Brother George is amazing. Brother George is the best." I had asked him to call me Brother George or Mr. George to keep things light, but he treated me like his absolute hero. Whenever I made my signature pear and hawthorn lollipops, Daniel's eyes would light up with joy. He would take tiny, careful licks to make the candy last, then give me a sweet, fruity kiss on the cheek. "Mom, Brother George's candy is way better than anything from the store," he would boast to Sarah when she came home from work. Seeing how much Daniel cherished the very things Hannah had thrown into the garbage filled me with a quiet, soothing comfort. One evening, my phone rang. It was Butler Thomas from the Lewis mansion. "Mr. Miller," the butler said nervously, "Miss Hannah won't go to sleep. She says she can't sleep without your bedtime stories." "She'll get used to it," I replied coldly. A few days later, Thomas called again. "Sir, Miss Hannah has a severe toothache from eating too many sweets. Could you please come back to comfort her?" "I'm not a dentist," I said, and hung up. A week later, I unexpectedly ran into Hannah. Sarah had gone out of town for a medical conference, so I was dropping Daniel off at his new kindergarten. Coincidentally, it was the same prestigious, private preschool Hannah attended. As I carried Daniel out of my car, I spotted Chloe's luxury sedan parked near the entrance. Hannah was sitting in the back seat, her eyes wide with shock as she saw me holding Daniel. She opened her mouth, about to call out "Dad," but the word caught in her throat. Even though Chloe and I were divorced, Hannah was still my biological daughter. I gave her a polite nod. "Hey, Hannah?" Hannah's face flushed red with anger. She stomped her feet, ignored my greeting, and ran into the school building like a pouted pufferfish. "George, didn't you promise never to come near Hannah again? It's only been a few months, and you're already ambushing her at her school?" I laughed in disbelief. "Are you insane, Chloe? Does your family own this entire school? I'm dropping off a child. If seeing me bothers you so much, why don't you transfer Hannah to another kindergarten tomorrow?" I turned and walked away with Daniel. Behind me, Chloe scoffed bitterly. "Keep pretending, George. Let's see how long you can hold out." In reality, Chloe was losing her mind. George had been gone for over a month, and the grand Lewis villa felt suffocatingly empty. She couldn't understand why the absence of such an ordinary, dispensable man was affecting her so deeply. Hannah wept constantly at home, clinging to the housekeeper and asking, "When is Dad coming home?" Chloe, who had been abandoned near a garbage dump as an infant before being reclaimed by the wealthy Lewis family, had no idea how to properly mother a child. Seeing Hannah cry, she snapped, "Stop crying! You look ugly when you cry." Hannah hiccuped through tears. "Mom, can you read me a bedtime story like Dad used to?" Frustrated, Chloe sat by Hannah's bed and opened a fairy tale book, but after reading just 2 pages, her patience ran out. She slammed the book shut. "Lights off. Sleep or don't sleep. I don't care." Hannah whimpered and pulled the covers over her face. For the first time, Chloe felt a deep, unsettling panic creeping into her soul. Seeing George at the kindergarten earlier had given her a brief sense of satisfaction, thinking he was lingering around just to catch a glimpse of Hannah. "He's just stubborn," Chloe muttered to herself in her bedroom. "He's using another kid to get my attention." To test her theory, Chloe kept Hannah home from kindergarten for the next 3 days, expecting George to panic and show up at the villa, begging to see his daughter. On the 3rd evening, Butler Thomas reported quietly, "Ma'am, Mr. Miller still goes to the kindergarten every single day to drop off and pick up that little boy. He hasn't come near our house at all." Chloe froze, her coffee cup shaking in her hand. Back at my apartment, 3 months had flown by. Sarah was an incredible woman. Being a surgeon, she brought her precise habits into the kitchen. She meticulously deboned fish and trimmed meat before cooking, making delicious, healthy meals for Daniel and me. One evening over dinner, I asked her gently, "Sarah, Daniel often cries out for his parents in his sleep. Did something happen to them?" Sarah's expression softened with sadness. "Daniel's parents, my brother and sister-in-law, died in a car crash last year. I adopted Daniel and legally registered him as my son to protect him from pitying stares." I was stunned. "So you're his biological aunt?" She nodded with a small smile. "I treat him as my own." "You're an amazing person, Sarah," I said genuinely. Sarah suddenly leaned closer across the dining table, her bright hazel eyes searching mine. "George, do you think a single mom like me could ever find a good man who truly loves her?" "Of course," I replied. "You're beautiful, brilliant, and kind-hearted. Any man would be lucky to have you." "Do you like me?" she asked softly. I caught my breath. The shift in conversation was so sudden. "Sarah, you don't?" she teased gently. "It's not that," I sighed. "It's just, in less than 3 years I have to leave. I have to go far away." Sarah's smile faded slightly. "Can't you forget your ex-wife? I heard rumors today that Chloe Lewis is officially marrying Mark next month." I chuckled softly. Why would I care about her marriage? "I'm glad she's moving on." Sarah's eyelashes fluttered, her eyes instantly brightening with hidden excitement. "Really? Should I send her a grand wedding gift to congratulate her?" I looked at her, amused. "Why are you so thrilled about my ex-wife getting married?" 6 months after our divorce, news of Chloe's upcoming wedding with Mark swept through high society. Yet, inside the Lewis mansion, Chloe felt no joy. The lingering memory of George haunted every room. She found herself staring blankly at the hand-carved wooden toys George had made for Hannah, feeling an overwhelming ache in her chest. When Mark brought her a rare pink diamond engagement ring, expecting her to be thrilled, Chloe felt only an eerie sense of emptiness. She had idolized Mark since childhood because he had once saved her from bullies in the orphanage and shared a sweet piece of fruit candy with her. She had spent 15 years convincing herself that Mark was the love of her life. But now, having achieved her dream of marrying him, why did her heart feel like it was being sliced by a dull blade? Driven by an inexplicable urge, Chloe drove to my apartment complex late one evening. She stood near the entrance and saw me walking back from the grocery store alongside Sarah and Daniel. The 3 of us were laughing, looking like a complete, happy family. When Sarah and Daniel went inside, Chloe stepped out from the shadows and blocked my path. She put on a strained, seductive smile, trying to act playful. Husband, why haven't you come home in so long? Are you secretly keeping another woman outside? She reached out to grab my arm. I instantly pulled my arm back, frowning at her coldness. Chloe, have you lost your mind? Seeing my total rejection, Chloe's facade shattered into anger. George, if I were truly done with you, I wouldn't have come here. If you still want Hannah, come back home right now. Otherwise, once I marry Mark next week, you'll never get another chance. I looked at her with pure indifference. Congratulations, Miss Lewis. And thank you for coming all this way to personally inform me of your wedding. Chloe's face turned pale, then beet red with humiliation. George, do you think you've struck gold with Sarah Vance? She's the heiress of the powerful Vance family from the South. Do you really think a prestigious woman like her would ever genuinely marry a divorced, jobless man like you? You're just a fool! I smirked calmly. So what if I'm divorced? Isn't your precious Mark divorced too? Did that stop you from chasing after him for years? Chloe gasped. I know how your family always viewed me, I continued coldly. A pathetic substitute. But look at yourself, Chloe. Married to me while dreaming of Mark, now marrying Mark while obsessing over your ex-husband. Do you still view yourself as some pure princess that every man must adore forever? I stepped closer, my voice slicing through the evening air. You think Mark is the light of your life? Go check his medical records before you marry him. You might be surprised by what diseases he picked up during his wild years abroad. You and Mark are actually a perfect match. Chloe stood frozen on the sidewalk, tears finally spilling from her eyes as I turned my back and walked away. A week before Chloe's wedding, Hannah arrived at my apartment building, accompanied by butler Thomas. Now almost 8 years old, Hannah had grown taller, her face losing its baby chubby cheeks. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Dad, she whispered softly as I brought her inside. Do you really not want me anymore? I sat across from her and offered a gentle smile. Hannah, Dad never said he didn't want you. It was always you who said you didn't want Dad. Then why won't you come home? She sobbed, looking down at the floor. Because I divorced your mother, and divorce means we live separate lives. Can't you come back just for me? She pleaded. I looked at my daughter seriously. Hannah, you're a smart girl, so I'll speak to you like an adult. In the past, I made the mistake of imposing my idea of love onto you and your mother. I thought keeping you away from sweets was good for you, but you hated it. To truly be good to someone, you must respect what they actually want, not what you think they need. I leaned in closer. You told me I was useless and that you wanted Uncle Mark to be your dad. You got your wish. Now, I have to live for my own happiness. I won't sacrifice my life for people who don't appreciate me. Hannah stayed silent, her small shoulders shaking as my words sank deep into her mind. Suddenly, a loud knock sounded at the door. Little Daniel burst inside, holding a handful of my homemade pear candies. Brother George, look what I brought! Daniel stopped when he saw Hannah. Oh, is this pretty girl your daughter? I nodded. Daniel immediately walked up to Hannah and handed her the candy. Sister, eat this. Brother George makes the best candy in the world. It's super yummy and healthy. Hannah looked at the golden lollipops in her hands, remembered how she had thrown my candy in the trash years ago, and burst into tears. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I patted her head gently. Some things, once thrown away, can never be brought back, Hannah. Chloe's wedding to Mark was grand and extravagant, trending all over the national news. In the photos, Mark was beaming with joy, while Chloe's smile looked stiff and hollow. Hannah stood beside them as the flower girl, looking utterly miserable. Her birthday wish from 3 years ago had finally come true. But it brought her no joy. Meanwhile, Sarah, Daniel and I were away on a beach vacation at a private seaside villa. Under the starry night sky, we ate hot pot and sliced watermelon, watching fireflies float over the garden. Daniel sat in my lap, handing me a slice of watermelon. "Brother George, your ex-wife got married today. Are you sad?" I nearly choked on my watermelon. "Who told you to ask that?" "Nobody," I asked myself. Daniel grinned mischievous. Then he looked at me earnestly. "Brother George, don't be sad. You have us now. Can I call you Dad from now on?" I scratched my head. "Well," Daniel cleared his throat like a little adult. "And if having me as your son isn't enough, I'll give you my mom as your wife." My hand trembled. "Daniel." Daniel turned and shouted toward the balcony where Sarah was watering plants. "Mom! Can you be Brother George's wife?" Sarah's ears turned bright red. Daniel jumped up happily, cheering, "Yay! I have a dad again." 3 years passed in a flash. My time with Sarah and Daniel was filled with genuine warmth, laughter, and love. But, as the final date approached, the mechanical voice of the system resounded in my mind once more. "Host, on the 3rd of next month at 16 hours, your departure procedure will initiate. Will you choose to stay or leave?" I fell silent. Meanwhile, in the Lewis mansion, Chloe's marriage to Mark had descended into a living nightmare. Mark turned out to be an abusive, cheating gambler who had squandered his own fortune abroad. After marrying Chloe, he used her money to host lavish parties with young models. Whenever Chloe confronted him, violent arguments erupted. One night, after drinking heavily at a bar, Chloe stumbled home to find Mark waiting in the living room. When she mentioned George's name in her sleep, Mark flew into a rage, slapping her hard across the face. "You despicable bitch! You married me, but you spend every night crying over your ex-husband." Chloe wiped the blood from her lip, her eyes cold. "Mark, let's get a divorce." "Divorce?" Mark gritted his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. "You trapped me in this marriage. I will never let you go. We will torture each other until the day we die." He slammed the door shut and locked her inside the room. Desperate to escape and find George before he vanished, forever, Chloe forced open the balcony window, jumped down to the courtyard below, and dragged her injured body to her car. She slammed her foot on the gas pedal, speeding recklessly through the city streets toward my apartment complex. At an intersection, her speeding car collided violently with an oncoming truck. In the piercing crash, the airbag deployed and blood dripped down her face. As her consciousness faded, she realized her legs were crushed under the crushed metal. Tears of pure regret streamed down her face. She had finally realized how deeply she loved George. But it was far too late. On the afternoon of my scheduled departure, I stood on the beach near my apartment, watching the setting sun horizon. Daniel was digging in the sand with a small shovel, muttering to himself, "Crab, don't pinch me. Brother George left today." I have to be brave. I walked up behind him and squatted down. "Digging for treasures, little brother?" Daniel whipped his head around, his eyes widening in shock. "Mom! Come quick, I'm hallucinating in broad daylight. Brother George is here." Sarah hurried over from the beach house, tears brimming in her eyes. "George, didn't you say you were leaving today?" I pointed to a custom birthday cake resting on the nearby picnic table. "Today is your birthday, Sarah. Did you really think I'd leave without celebrating with you?" Sarah's smile bloomed like a spring flower. Tears of joy spilled over her cheeks. Daniel cheered, splashing water in the waves. "You're not leaving! You're really staying!" Sarah tucked her hair behind her ear, looking at me with deep affection. "George, why did you stay? Was it because of us?" I smiled softly. "Of course it is." The previous afternoon at the hospital, the system had nagged me relentlessly. "Host, you are so fickle. You accumulated all those points to wake up from your coma, and now you want to spend them all here." I had stood outside an emergency operating room at the hospital where Sarah worked. A desperate patient had attacked a brilliant senior doctor, Dr. Hayes, stabbing him severely. Dr. Hayes was Sarah's mentor and close friend. When he was rushed into surgery, the doctor said his chances of survival were 0. I had spoken to the system in my mind. System, can I exchange all my accumulated return points to save Dr. Hayes' life? Host, if you do that, your points will be reset to 0. You will lose your chance to return to your original world and wake up from your coma forever. I smiled peacefully. It's okay, system. My real body is just a lonely orphan, lying in a hospital bed with no family waiting for me. But in this world, I have Sarah and Daniel. They are my real family. The system went quiet for a long moment, then sighed softly in my head. You foolish rascal. Fine. Point exchange confirmed. Dr. Hayes will survive, and host. To tell you the truth, there was never a 3-year cooling-off period. I made that up because I wanted you to stay here and find true happiness. I chuckled softly. I know, system, thank you. Standing on the beach under the warm golden glow of the sunset, I wrapped my arms around Sarah, pulling her and Daniel close into my embrace. I made a deal with the universe, I whispered into Sarah's hair. I'm never leaving you two. I'm staying right here, forever. Sarah buried her face in my chest, crying tears of overwhelming relief and happiness. George, thank you. Thank you for choosing us. Daniel hugged my legs tightly, laughing through his tears. Mom, you're a grown-up, and you cry more than I do. I laughed, scooping Daniel up into one arm while holding Sarah with the other. As the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the coastline in brilliant twilight, the 3 of us walked hand in hand along the water's edge, heading back to the place we finally called home.